I'm excited to talk to our next professor. There's been a lot of talk lately about our law enforcement officers when they encounter certain people, especially at some of the traffic stops. How do you encounter and read some signals from people that are, have autism? Or, just even maybe other people like veterans who suffer from PTSD. And so they want to try to get the officers more training. And we have a local professor who was granted an award to be able to focus on this and help teach some of our law enforcement officers on what they should do to try to help ease that relationship when they encounter someone on the spectrum. So let's go ahead and bring in Professor Chaturi Edrisinha. She's with the School of Education and Human Services at Oakland University. So great to have you with us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Ronnie. Hi, Tyler.
We were laughing before because it looks like we all coordinated our outfits today.
Let's say we did.
Yes, we look like twinsies today.
And I will say, when you work in news and you anchor, they do that. Coordinate some of their clothes and stuff. What color are you wearing today? And right. Especially when you have women, so you don't clash up there.
Sure.
But we did not do that. But I will say, you seem like you're the happiest person.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So how have you been doing through the pandemic?
Well, I was very fortunate because I have always been teaching online courses. So it wasn't a huge transition for me, but it was a huge transition for my students because they're generally teachers who are teaching across the state of Michigan. And they had to very, very quickly switch from a face-to-face class to an online classroom. And that was quite a change.
So you were ahead of the curve before everyone else. See, look at that. Already a trailblazer before you even knew.
Well, that's Oakland.
So
most of our program is online. So that really helps because we have students from Kalamazoo to Grand Valley to Oakland County. So they're all over the state of Michigan and they're in special education classrooms. And they come to Oakland to get an advanced degree on autism.
And how did you get into studying autism?
Well, I was an undergraduate student many, many years ago in a psychology program. And I was fortunate to have a professor who knew I was really struggling for cash and asked me if I wanted to have a little job on the side. And I said, oh, of course I do. And so he introduced me to a family without really telling me what it was about. And I had no idea. I didn't know what autism was. I hadn't even heard the word before. I didn't even know how to kind of correctly pronounce the word.
Wow.
And I was all but 18 years of age. So he introduced me to this young man who at that time was 17, going on 18. So we were about the same age. And he was nonverbal. And I was like, okay, what can I do with this young man? And so I decided, well, sure, I'll work with him. And the money was very good and I needed it. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll try to teach him how to play basketball. And it's a great game because I'm fairly petite and fairly short. And he was tall, so I thought, well, he'll get a little bit of advantage, which is good. So, maybe it will give him some confidence to, be able to play basketball against me. And so we started playing basketball. And this really changed this young man's life. And it was just amazing for the family. The family had never, ever, had that kind of social interaction. This is 20 years ago, so there was very little kind of recreational skills. And most of the, folks on the spectrum were just working in workshops. So they weren't really thinking of things like leisure or just quality of life. So it changed their lives. And I remember asking the dad if he wanted to join this young man and play basketball. And the entire time, the dad was just crying, just, this grown man who was like 6'2", just having tears pouring down his face. And that just changed my life, and it changed the kind of direction I was going. So I was going into clinical psychology, and I decided, well, no, I want to study autism. And so that was one of the best decisions I have made in my life.
Oh, and I'm sure the family is still grateful to have you as well. Isn't it amazing how these one encounters can really put us
Yes.
on a different path in the world, and how many lives you've touched just by changing your focus to autism?
Absolutely. I mean, that was 20 years ago. I've, gone through, I probably have worked with maybe direct contact, probably about, 1,000 families, but then indirectly, I've trained so many students who have gone on to train people. So that impact factor is absolutely amazing. And it just was because of this one young man and one professor that changed my life. So I'm so very, very grateful to be faculty and to be part of that process of paying that forward and then training the next generation of faculty.
Professor, I know we want to talk about your latest research with the police departments, but before we get there, if I can ask you, because we have had a few parents on over the past year with autistic kids, and it's been hard for them through the pandemic, and some of the kids have suffered setbacks because of the change in the routine and not having that one-on-one interaction. What has been your take on how the pandemic has impacted some of the families and the kids with autism?
Well, I think the pandemic has affected all of us in ways that I think we're just beginning to understand, right? So in a couple of years, we can look back and say, this is, I think, due to the pandemic. But particularly for kids with autism, it's been very, very difficult because you're looking at kids who are in a spectrum. So you have kids that need very little supports because they are pretty much functioning like their neurotypical peers cognitively. So they're getting A's and doing really well. But they need a lot of social skill supports. And so they're not doing well socially. So their IEPs, or their individualized education plans, or their goals are very different to kids on the other end of the spectrum that need those high supports, where their goals are maybe trying to, integrate cognitive skills in the classroom as well as social skills. So you have this wide spectrum of kids that need different types of supports. So already it's an issue where it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. So it's an individualized approach. But across that spectrum, almost all of those kids do best with structure and routine and familiarity. So that switch was incredibly tough, not just for the kids, but also for the families who had to then kind of work with these kids who were at home, and they were trying to struggle on how to become a teacher at home. I mean, we all did, but it was particularly hard. And I kind of worry now about them going back to face-to-face. I think that's going to be another transition. That's going to be tough because I think all of our teachers have worked so hard and so well to kind of get that routine into place, to get that structure into place online for the last year, and they've done really well. So now we have to kind of switch back to a classroom, and that's going to be tough too. So it's going to be a lot of changes.
That's such a good point, Professor, because we've all been so concerned about the kids at home, but really a lot of talk and thought has not gone into them going back into the classroom, and that transition back into that routine. So, and then you think about some of these schools where one week they're remote, the next week they're in person, they're hybrid. It can be so confusing for so many people. And with that, though, too, can we go ahead and jump into some of your latest research? I know that you're working with some police departments on training about what they should do if they interact and they come encounter with an autistic person. How did this research come about?
Well, I think for me, it was something that was almost cathartic. I remember when I was I first moved to the state of Michigan, and I was pulled over. And this was quite a traumatic experience for me, like just hearing the sirens. I was already nervous. And so when the police officer, asked me to put my window down and I started asking questions, I was exceedingly nervous. And I was just, blurting out rubbish. And I realized immediately, the moment I was saying these things, that, oh, I shouldn't have said that, And luckily, because I was a neurotypical, I was able to repair that communication. And for me, fortunately, the officer also was very patient and had that good sense to, let me talk it out so I could get to whatever question he was asking me. And so, it turned out to be a good outcome. But that kind of got me thinking, because I was working in starting a program at Oakland where we pair neurotypicals with students, university students with autism. And part of what we were doing was teaching them how to drive and giving them support driving. And then that just got me thinking, well, what if these students, these college kids, so you're looking at cognitively high functioning young men and women who have a driver's license, and so they can drive, they're independent, but what if they get pulled over? How would that encounter look like? Because a lot of the behaviors they will exhibit, like not having eye contact, evasive questions, taking things literally, a lot of the kind of the stereotypical behavior that they exhibit are really markers for law enforcement, and they convey risk, right? So the police officer is kind of trained to pick up on those things. So that really got me thinking about, well, what is it that I can do to address that? If I, as a neurotypical, had so much difficulty navigating this very, very stressful situation, then how would that impact someone with autism who doesn't have the kind of communication skills or the social skills to navigate out of that? So that's kind of where it started.
We're talking with Professor Edrisinha over at the School of Education and Human Services at Oakland University. She is working on a research project with law enforcement officers and when they encounter people with autism. And can I ask, how does the program look? Is it virtual or in person?
Yes. So what I did was to design these kind of vignettes. And right now, they're two-dimensional, so they would watch the vignette, and then there's a training that goes on with that. We're hoping to kind of make it into a 360 ocular system where it's completely virtual reality. Right now, they're just virtual. And that way, we don't really have to put the person at risk, and the police officer has a number of chances or multiple tries to de-escalate the situation without getting to that aversive or negative outcome. So there's a kind of like a training that they'll go through. We'll do a pre-test and a post-test and evaluate the efficacy of the training. So that's kind of how it's set up. Right now, we're so fortunate to partner with Oakland University, the police department. And then we're hoping to expand that to Rochester and the other police departments. So yeah, I would be so happy if we can scale that up in the state.
So what has been the reaction from the officers that have taken part in this so far?
Well, thank you so much, Ronnie, for asking that question because I think it's very, very important. The officers have been so just blown away, honestly. We just finished a series of questions, like debriefing questions that we did I did with a former graduate of mine who's now at Marshall University, and we kind of talked to the officers to see what their reaction was. And they were just so grateful, I must say, for the training because a lot of it is because they didn't know like what to do, right? So it's not like you have a trained officer going in there and they're making decisions that are uninformed. You have a situation where you have an officer going in there with really no training, so they're going in blind, and all the training that they have is that risk analysis from looking at a situation where there's someone who is who's a risk, So they've got all of their, skills are there, but all of their senses are heightened. And that's not a good combination if you want to de-escalate a situation. So I think what the training does is it provides another level of tools and another level so that of training to their current MOCAS training in the state of Michigan. So it's really, I think, something that they were really truly grateful for.
So with that, Professor, just another minute or two with you here on the show. How long is the training? Is this something that, since it is virtual, that would be easy for other departments to reach out to you if they want to take part in it?
Absolutely. They can contact me at ouca@oakland.edu. And most of the trainings will try to kind of individualize it to the police department, depending on how many officers they have and how much time they have, so they can kind of fit that into their training modules. So most of the police departments, they have some modules in the winter as well as in the spring. And so we try to kind of fit into their ongoing training. So it's not something that they have to remove, where they have to remove some module to plug this in. So they can kind of accommodate that with their current training.
Well, we so appreciate your time. We'd love to have you back on, maybe with some of the officers that have gone through the training. I think it'd be great to have their perspective as well. When did you start the research?
Well, we started it prior to the pandemic, and then we shot one of the scenes, and then right after that, we were shut down for a year. So we're just beginning to restart. So it's just, it was just restarting and trying to catch up after the pandemic.
Well, we do want to say congratulations, because we know you won the award to be able to help get this program going. But you do so much work with so many families with kids that are on the spectrum. And we want to say thank you for all of your work and for the families and for our community as well. And so we look forward to having you on again, and good luck on the research and on the project.
Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks, Tyler.